Welcome back to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast in partnership with the Illinois Basketball Coaches Association. Today's guest is Zack Ryan, head boys basketball coach at Warren High School. We talked to Coach Ryan about building this program over time, timeout strategy and development, communicating with your players, and developing a level of player commitment throughout the program. As always, thank you for listening to the After the Timeout podcast. All right, so let's get started with our opening tip. You were recently quoted as saying that you always thought Warren was one of the best high school coaching jobs around. So I want us to tell you kind of, after the summer here and getting going, tell us about Warren as a program, and maybe some of your players, some of the things you got going on, what you're most excited about. And why do you feel so strongly that it's one of the best high school coaching jobs around?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm just very lucky and humbled that I have this opportunity at Warren. And the quote you mentioned, obviously I had been at Carmel the last 8 years, but previous to that I was coaching at Mundelein. So when I came down here about 2010, right out of college, I was on the Mundelein staff, and that was when Warren was really doing well. And I just remember like going to Warren and watching their teams and kind of following their history and how successful they had been. And I think that first year I was down here, they went downstate and ended up losing to Jabari Parker's team. I just was always kind of intrigued by that job and the type of athletes they get, and obviously the rich coaching history with Coach Ramsey and Coach Bader, and I always just kind of thought that would be a great place to get to. 8-10 years later, I didn't really think that would be the case, but sometimes timing is everything, and for me it just worked out that I can end up here after the summer. So this is probably about 2 months into the job at Warren. After the summer, it's been nice to kind of just sit back a little bit and kind of evaluate how the summer went, because really it went really, really fast. There's so much to do. As coaches, how busy June is, but on top of just the regular busy June that everyone has, we basically uprooted an entire summer league and moved it over to Carmel. Getting camp organized, getting the youth camp organized, getting our schedules kind of transferred. So it was I felt like a lot of it was more administrative, and then the best part was just the 2 hours of camp and the games where I could just focus on coaching. But it was a busy summer, a fast summer. We went through June with camp in our league and some tournaments, and then now we took a week or two off, and then we got them back in the gym about 3 days a week, just doing lifting and some open gym and getting a lot of shots up. But, back to your first point with Warren, I think one thing is just the facilities. The amount of space there is unbelievable. The weight room, we have basically some cardio rooms, a yoga room. Like the facilities are there's just tons of space. And, that's something that's great too. I know last week we went up into the storage area, just trying to kind of inventory uniforms and stuff. And there is just stuff all over the place. There's so many areas that you can use and that can impact your program. So that was another really intriguing thing. For our summer league, we had 5 courts going. So in our main gym, we could put that into 3 courts, and then we have a field house that could be put into 2 courts. And then at Warren, there's 2 campuses. There's a freshman sophomore campus and a junior senior campus, so that gives us options too as well. So combining all those things together, I thought is what made the Warren job very intriguing. And like I said, I'm just lucky that I'm where I'm at.
So we wanted to kind of talk about a little bit of how you started as a head coach at Carmel in the beginning. As we like to say, we're just going to say your first 3 years, you had a few more losses than wins. We're going to put it like that. And after that, in the 3 out of the 4 years that we had an IHSA playoffs because of COVID, you won a regional. So in those first few years, how did you maintain that level of commitment in the players and coaches through those first few seasons where maybe the losses outnumbered the wins?
Yeah, so I was hired. I was young when I was hired at Carmel by the athletic director Andy Bitto. I was 28, and it was kind of late in the game too that year. And I would say the first couple of years was just basically just trying to build a program and to get kids out and to get kids to buy into kind of what we were trying to do and to trying to sell. And yeah, I think the first year we went 12-19, and then 13-18, and then 14-16. We weren't above 500, but I think you could see the seeds were kind of getting planted. And those first 3 years, we played a lot of young kids. I think in 3 of my first 4 years, we started at least one freshman. I know the second year, we had times where we were starting 2 or maybe 3 freshmen, just based on numbers and based on if the kid could play or not. So the first 3 years, we're getting incrementally better. I think my coaching staff was getting incrementally better, and then our feeder program was growing and getting better. So I think by that 4th year, I think when we won our first regional, and I think we were 19-12, 19-12. That kind of set the tone for these last few years. I think once at any program, once you win, winning becomes kind of a habit. So there's an expectation there. So then you go from 19 wins to 22 wins. And then I think the COVID year we were 19, and then last year up to 23. I think winning can be a habit. And once you can establish that, the rest can kind of fall into place. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't something that happened right away. It took time. It took a lot of open gyms, a lot of getting kids out for basketball, a lot of getting kids to buy into the commitment, your coaches to buy into the commitment. And like I said, once you start winning, it becomes a little bit easier to sell those things you're trying to sell to the kids and to the parents and to whoever.
So you just mentioned it in your answer, but you're a young coach and you get hired and you jump right into the East Suburban Catholic, right? One of the best conferences around. So I wanted to ask you, you started, what are some of the lessons you learned, kind of being in that conference, maybe from other coaches or just the level of play? And how do you feel that made you a better coach and pushed you to improve?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like you said, yeah, I mean, and I don't know if I mentioned this to John at some point when we were talking, but I was guilty as when I was a young coach, I thought I knew everything, sort of like I had played basketball. I thought I knew basketball, and what the best thing for a young coach, I think, is for them to realize that they actually don't know anything. And when I started as a head coach, I think the biggest obstacle for me was delegating, being able to delegate things to other coaches. And I think one of the things in our conference, you'll know, not the East Suburban, you notice, is that yes, there's some outstanding head coaches, but those coaches have fantastic staffs. And I think one of the things I was able to do through those first few years is hire on some really good, dedicated coaches. And, the guy that's with me now at Warren, that was with me at Carmel, his name is Fidel Garcia. He came over in my 4th year at Carmel. And, I was able to, and he's a very good coach. I was able to give him more responsibility. So I wasn't doing as much as I thought I was, as far as game planning, practice planning, meeting with kids, organizing all the stuff you got to do in season, team meet, like all those kind of things that a head coach is responsible for, that I was able to eventually, I thought, well, I have to do all this. I'm the head coach. I got to do this. I got to do this. Once I realized that wow, like if you get good assistant coaches that are on board with you, they can help you out with a lot of that stuff. So that was probably the biggest thing I learned. I also learned the importance um, the the importance of getting kids to understand the conference that they were in. Traditionally, before I came, Carmel wasn't very successful in the conference. Once we started to get the kids to buy in to see how good our league is and how good the coaches are, I think that's when we started to become more successful in the East Suburban. And like I said, once you start winning a little bit, it becomes a habit. So, and that conference is just littered with so many good coaches and Hall of Fame coaches and teams that are constantly competing to go downstate, winning regional sectionals. And I just you always had to be prepared. Scouting is very important. Game prep, having a regimented game day pattern that you go through, how you handle your warm-ups. I mean, everything has to be laid out, and the expectations have to be laid out for the kids if you want to compete in a league like that. And the other thing is you're only playing each of these teams once. So you're only playing them once. You don't get another crack at them. So you got to be ready that very first time, the only time you see them to compete, because it's one loss can change the course of the conference standings and your season, basically.
So you kind of touched on assistant coaches. So we wanted to delve in a little bit to assistant coaches. First, I wanted to touch on something you had just said, which was talking about delegating to your assistants. What do you look for when you're hiring assistants to be able to then know, hey, this is someone I can delegate to?
I think, it's number one, I think, and any high school coach knows that, like, we're doing this for more than the paycheck, right? So when you're hiring coaches, you want them to kind of be the same type of guys you are, right? Like, a basketball guy that just loves coaching and loves working with kids and are junkies. So because you can't be successful if your coaches aren't totally into what you're trying to do. It makes it very difficult. I don't care how talented a coach is, how great X's and O's, if they're not if they're not totally invested in what you're trying to do and your mission and trying to be successful, it's very hard. So the other thing I look for is, like, do they want to eventually be a head coach? I think, when I was an assistant, my goal was to become a head coach. And I think the coaches I was under knew that, and they could help mentor me, and I could watch them and see what it's like to run a program. So if you have assistants that want to be eventually be head coaches, or even better, sometimes that were head coaches already, that gives you a huge lift. And I can't stress how important having good coaches is. Now at Warren, moving on to Warren a little bit, my assistant that's with me, Fidel, is coming with me, and then I'm lucky enough on our sophomore staff, our head coach is Don Cloth. Don, I don't know if you remember, Don was the head coach at Zion for years. He's got the most wins in Lake County history, and he gets to be he's my sophomore coach. So I'm really lucky to have those two guys, and I've had a blast getting to know Don a little bit here over the past couple months, and just kind of pick his brain and just talk basketball, because that guy, I mean, he's a junkie just like I am. So, like, we can just talk basketball, and he can give me, I ask him questions, and he gives me great experiences. Sometimes it's just stories. I mean, he's a really good coach, a really good man. So I'm happy to have him. So I think, to answer your question, a combination of maybe a guy that wants to be a head coach, or a guy that has been a head coach and just kind of wants to step back and be a head sophomore coach and just worry about coaching and not all the other stuff. I think those are the two things when you're looking for an assistant that have helped me so far.
So obviously, as you just kind of discussed, you brought 3 assistants from Carmel to Warren with you. What does that do overall for the timeline of the program, of establishing the culture, of establishing that winning attitude? kind of take us through, why was it important for you to bring those three with you, and what does it do for the timeline at Warren?
Yeah, well, no, it certainly helps. And one of them that came with me, so I mentioned Fidel, is this guy's going to be our head freshman coach. He was actually the head sophomore coach with me at Carmel last year, and we were lucky enough to get him a teaching position in the building. That's another bonus, I think. A lot of times at Carmel, I was the only coach or the only teacher in the building sometimes, and that creates different issues that you might have to go through. But yeah, basically bringing some of those guys over, they know what we're trying to do. They've been a part of our recent successes. They understand our system. They understand the expectations I have for coaches and for the players. So that helps a ton. Anytime there's a transition like this, it's difficult, but being able to bring guys, one guy that's with me and then another guy that's at the lower levels, that really has helped, like you kind of said, speed up what we're doing, because it's kind of like, well, I give my assistants a lot of freedom. So it's nice for me he knows what we're doing. If he needs something, he can come to me. If I need something, I come to him. But I can basically say, hey, we're doing, he knows what the expectations are for the kids, and I can trust him because he's been with me for 4 or 5 years. That's one less thing off, kind of off my plate. The other thing is at Warren, the numbers, obviously it's a bigger school. There's 4,000 kids, so you're handling more kids a lot of times too. So that creates, different things that can in a transition can be difficult. So having guys that you know and guys that you trust is huge.
So just wanted to go. Recently, you won your 100th game, awesome accomplishment. Now you're going over to Warren, but I wanted to talk to you about some of the lessons you've learned from losses, right? Yeah, you remember the wins and stuff, but I feel like a lot of coaches, yeah, we have this big win in a region or whatever, but it's always that one loss, right? Where you lost by 2, or maybe I should have done this or that. So what are some of the things, maybe even, start early on, and then as you got later into your coaching, that you take away from losses?
Yeah, well, I think you learn more from losses than you do from wins. I think that's, most coaches would agree with that. I think most of the time, and I have these discussions with kids and our players. Most of the time, I think the games you lose aren't always lost in the game. It's lost in the practice the days before, or the preparation in the days before, whether it's in the weight room or film study or things like that. Obviously, as a coach, we're all making mistakes all the time. So as a coach, you make a mistake in a game. Oh, I should have called a timeout. Maybe, I should have got this guy in. Oh, maybe we should have taken off the press in this situation. I mean, those are things. Those to me are the things you can watch film on at the end, after the game, and learn from that. I think the biggest things you learn are in the preparation leading up to that, maybe in your practices. And I think the structuring of your practice and how you lay out a regimen for your practice and your stretching and making sure these guys are hydrated and that they're in the weight room and they're doing those are the things I think that pay off the most. And a lot of that, again, is help from your assistant coach. I think this last year, what helped us be successful at the end of the year is I thought we were in tremendous physical shape. And I think that helped us win that last, win a regional and, lose in triple overtime to St. Pat's. But I think the thing that helped us the most, and that's something I had learned, is maintaining kids' conditioning and their strength and conditioning throughout a season. And I think that paid off for us a lot at the end, because there had been seasons where we would have this great stretch, beginning of February, right up until playoffs, maybe a little bit before. And I thought, even though we were winning some regionals and winning some games, we weren't at our very best, playing our best. And I don't think it was so much X's and O's and strategy. I think our guys maybe weren't in the best shape they had to be in, even at the end of the season. because I was always a guy that said, you want to cut your practice times down throughout the, as you go through the year. And that's fine. I agree with that. But I think the extra emphasis a little bit on their conditioning and the health of their body and what they're eating. I think I've learned a lot about that, managing that for an entire season. X's and O's wise, there are times, of course, where you're thinking about who you could put in there, a timeout here or there. That stuff to me is kind of the easier stuff, if you want to say it, because you can go back and look at that and learn from that just based on tape and based on situational type of things. The last thing I would say is I think also the emphasis, especially when it comes down to close games, because the close games you lose are the ones that hurt the most, right? Is really, really, and I didn't do this enough early on in my career, is emphasizing situations in practice, at the end of practice, or whenever you want to do it during practice, putting kids in those situations so they can use them to learn, so then they can carry them into the game. And so I've really, the last few years, really have added that to our practice, and you gotta really do it. You gotta carve out time to do it, because it's very important. Because as you know, kids nowadays are playing so many games, whether it's AAU and summer league. Sometimes the situational basketball IQ stuff gets left on the end, right, where they're not really working on that a ton. So we really put a lot of emphasis on doing that stuff from the beginning of the season all the way to the end, working on situations.
So building on that, I kind of want to talk about timeouts. Kind of take us through what in your 8-10 years, what you've learned about managing timeouts, the difference between a 30 and a full, how you use your timeouts, and do you use any of them early? Do you save them all to the end? There's lots of philosophies on timeouts. We just wanted to kind of pick your brain on kind of what's your timeout rhythm philosophy ideas.
Save them. I've always thought that, I've always, been a fan and been a fan of saving them to the end as much as you can. Now, you're not sacrificing, a lead or anything like that. I've always kind of used them based off of situations at the end of games, needing to stop the clock or whatever you need to do that way. I also base it off how I just like the vibe of my team. Sometimes I'll take a timeout. So if we're going on a run, and even if we're playing really well, sometimes I'll take a timeout just to show them, okay, this is what we're talking about. This little 2-minute stretch here that we're doing really well. This is what we're talking about. We got to build off that if I feel maybe they're a little tired, or maybe if there's one thing we want to adjust. Obviously, if things are really starting to fall off the wagon, you want to take a timeout right away, early. I've always, depending on the team I have, if I have a team of veteran guys, I like to let them play through early struggles in games a lot. And I think a lot of it depends on your team. It really depends on the kids and what kind of leaders you have. Ideally, if you can let your kids kind of figure it out and save your timeouts to the end of the game, if it's, you need them for substitutions or to stop the clock or whatever it is, I think that's an added benefit. But I always think, it's games can be lost if you don't have a timeout at the end, right? They can be lost if you need a timeout to stop the clock. If the kids make a basket and, it's not the NBA, so the clock keeps going. You need to keep your timeout. So I've always been a coach that's kind of saved them as much as I can to the end of games. And between 30 and full, I mean, again, that kind of depends on what you have. A full is if your team's really, really maybe getting run off the floor, or they're tired, or whatever it may be. I think the last couple of years it's been even different. I've actually probably haven't used any, there hasn't been a game where I used all my timeouts because we've had those mass breaks. And those are another timeout. So, and I found those to be good and bad. I think sometimes it's nice to let your kids kind of figure out what needs to get fixed, especially in the first half of a game.
So I want to go into communicate. Obviously, you're taking over a program, move to a new place. So communicating your philosophies to your team. And I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. For offense and defense, boiling it down to one sentence, what is your goal on offense, and what is your goal on defense? One sentence ish. We'll allow
For
run
each-
on sentences.
For each
Yeah.
one?
For each one. What's your
Okay.
philosophy?
Offensively, I would say attack. We want to attack on offense. That's our biggest thing. And what I mean by that is we like to play at a faster pace. So we like to try to get the ball out as fast as possible and get it up the floor. And the reason for that, I think, is just, to me, it always seemed easier to score baskets when there's less guys on defense. So when we run our fast break, we just talk about having numerical mismatches. You have more guys on offense and more guys on defense. And we really focus on getting our guys to sprint if they don't have the basketball in their hand. So if it's made basket, missed basket, we're trying to get our guys to run the floor and get up and score as many points as we can. We think that we've coached that way for a while, and it's getting kids to understand the importance of, if you want to score, you can sprint and score without dribbling a ton or getting the ball up fast and in a secondary break and getting one pass, two pass layup, or one pass, two pass transition three. So I would say we're always trying to attack offensively, and defensively, I think, we just say we want to be tough. We're pretty much a tough man-to-man defensive team. We're going to sit in the stance. We're going to work you, whether it be in the full court or the half court. We focus a ton on taking charges, and for us, everything starts with our defense. If our defense is solid and we can get stops and we can rebound, I think that even when you're not shooting well, and this is something I've kind of switched a little bit too. I used to in the summers, I used to really work on our offense and kind of focus more on our defensive stuff until the season. I've sort of flipped that because I've learned that without good defense, none of the offensive stuff can work anyway. So that's kind of our philosophy. The kids understand that if they want to play this way, they have to be in very good shape. We're not really trying to walk the ball up and play slow. We don't do a ton of zone, and not that any of that stuff is bad. It's what we do and what we sell. And I think at Warren, with the type of athletes, the type of kids we have, the system we've run in the past can be very successful.
All right, so I wanted to follow up offensively. You talked about running the floor, sprinting the floor, and I think everybody says it, right? But it's hard. It's really hard to teach, right? Like coaches are like, run. But how do you go about teaching kids what that means, what it looks like, how it feels, right? Because I feel like a lot of times, like, coach, I am running, but then you get the eye in the sky and you're like, well, you're not running. You know what I mean? Like, so how do you go about kind of getting that consistency? Because that's the key to it, right? Getting consistent sprinting down the court. It can't be one out of every three.
Right. Because like you said, everyone's like, hey, we want to run and do this. Like it's kind of something, it's kind of like a canned statement that kids or coaches always say. For us, everything's got to be on a timer. So we have a couple drills where they have to get the ball out and get to half court within 3 seconds. And that means when the ball goes through the rim until the inbounder takes it out, they have 3 seconds to get it to half court. That's a 3-on-0 drill we do. We do another drill that's called 7 and 45, where they have to get 7 shots off in 45 seconds, and 4 of them have to be threes. So basically, there's 45 seconds on the clock. You got your 5 guys out there. They take the ball out. As soon as the guy outlets the ball, the clock starts. They got to get 4. And when I say 7 shots, 7 made shots. So they got to shoot 4 threes and then 3 basically layups. Get it done. And so, like you said, you made a good point. It's not just you got to run. You have to have certain objectives that they have to meet in your drills so that they get into the mindset of, well, this is what I have to do, because the practices should be, at least our practices are a lot harder than the games. And when we do our drills, and that's the other thing that I've learned the importance of is having a manager. That's something I didn't even think about when I was a first year coach. But having a manager that can run your drills effectively and know, because we do everything on a clock and a timer, and that could be the big clock and then like a side clock that's like a shot clock or something for just a specific drill. But for that fast break stuff, it's got to be there have to be objectives they have to meet for the drill to be successful. And if they don't, then they're probably not sprinting hard enough, because either they're not in good enough shape or they're just not running hard. And so yeah, it's easy to say, okay, guys, run hard, fast, like do that. But until they're held accountable with like I said, we use a clock. It's hard for them to see that without there being a objective to meet.
And then my kind of follow up on defense is, obviously defense everybody would say is effort and hard and all those things, but this is 2022. Incentivizing things is important. Kind of how are you incentivizing that key focus on charges? How are you incentivizing the one shot by the opponent defensive rebound? What are you doing to kind of incentivize those things?
I think a lot of that too is in your practices. We try to make everything as much as we can, whether it's shooting, skill work, offense, defense, a competition. And, I think, like you said, it's easy to say, hey, get tough. I think the best way to build toughness in kids, and this could be in any sport, is putting them in situations where they have no choice but to be tough to get out of them, whether it's a 1-on-1, a 2-on-2, or 5-on-5. And then they see those things. So if you're focusing and you're emphasizing, hey, for us to be successful, we're going to have to take charges. For us to be successful, we're going to have to get stops. And then they see that, whether it is, whether there's an incentive at the end of a drill, or we chart charges, we keep those stats. Some days it might be, hey, Gatorade for every guy that takes a charge. Things like that. We try to, but it's more for the big picture. So if they see that that those type of things lead to success, all right, and it's showing them like, this happened because you did this. This fast break opportunity happened because you boxed out and we got a good outlet. Therefore, you scored. Like showing them why there's a reason for everything we're saying. And you kind of touched on it where it's easy. Hey, run fast, but when the kids can see, hey, this happened because you did this, then that's when they can start, duplicating those behaviors and keep working on those things, because they see this leads to success. And I think that's just basically what coaching is, right? We're trying to put them in the most successful situations possible for themselves and for the team, but they have to see that, and that can come within practice, that can come within film, that can come within a conversation. I think if you show them why this happened, because you took a charge, or hey, we took 3 charges in the first half, we're up 15. That's why. That's part of the reason why. When they see that or hear that enough, then they start to pick up on it.
So we wanted to get into, this is interesting, I think, for our listeners. Right after you were hired, you got a chance to meet with your players at Warren. So for our listeners who maybe, want to be a head coach or just getting their first head coaching job, what were some of those important things that you wanted to establish in those initial meetings? And in that very first meeting, what was your goal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say even before that, I would say one of the hardest meetings I ever had to do was when I was telling the Carmel guys that I was leaving. That was the first thing. That was very difficult. That was probably the most nervous I think I'd ever been in coaching, whether it was going into a game or that was very hard to tell those guys, those returning guys. There's 3 groups of people I thought that were the toughest to tell. My current players, some of my former players, and my kids, my own kids. Those were the 3 groups of people that made it really hard, because I had some great relationships at Carmel. I coached a bunch of really good kids, some kids that could play, some kids that were just great kids that were there with me from the beginning. And then this past year, just my own kids, they're 8 and 7. They were just starting, with COVID, they kind of had that year off. They're really starting just to get into high school basketball, being on the bench, being at practice, being at games. And our guys were great with them. So they were, my oldest son didn't talk to me for 2 days when I told him I was leaving. My daughter was really upset, and then she kind of came around the same day. But my oldest was down because he loved Carmel. He loved all those guys. But now, he's coming to Warren camp with me and doing all the stuff he's doing, that he was doing at Carmel at Warren. So that was tough. But to get back to what you're saying, I think the first, and then I had two meetings. I had a meeting with the kids, the returning players at Warren, and then the parents. And basically, the biggest thing I was just trying to get through to them. It was two things. It was logistical things about the summer because we had to get that stuff out. So camp, the administrative stuff. And then the second thing was basically, what are we trying to accomplish? It wasn't so much, we weren't talking X's and O's and stuff like that. I just explained to them what our expectations were and basically our big three things that I talk about all the time, and it's character, communication, and trust. And just call it CTC. I think it's important that every coach talks about culture and what they want to do. I found it to be more specific, and some coaches might pick their culture based on a successful college coach or NBA coach or something like that, and that's great. I found that mine is constantly developing what my vision and what our culture is, and I try to communicate this to the parents and the coaches and the parents and the players. Character, communication, trust. That's what we're going to try to build our program on. And by character, guys that are high character on and off the floor, guys that are good guys, good teammates. Trust is, we need to, in order for a team to be successful, the players, the coaches, the parents, they have to trust each other. And that's something that takes time and is worked on a lot. And then the communication part, none of that stuff can happen without communication. And we really, really focus a ton on that. And it's not so much communication on the floor, but I got ball. That's great. We have to do that too. Communication off the court about scheduling, what's going on at home, how can we help you? Just communicating all the time. I think that's those three things I tried to hammer home to those guys in that first meeting, and then we've worked on it all summer. And obviously, it's a process. But those three things are kind of our big three: character, communication, and trust. Or character, trust, communication. Those three, we just call it CTC. And we felt that I feel that if you can get those three things down, you can have a successful team. And that doesn't always mean you win the most games, but if your team buys into those three things and you can get your players to buy into those three things, I think the rest can kind of take care of itself. So, and a lot of that stuff's worked on off the court. It's not on the court so much. It's stuff that's worked on off the court, whether it be team building exercises or just conversations with kids, meetings, groups of kids. Those things can be built in a variety of ways.
All right, so I want to go maybe let's zoom out and go a little bit bigger picture. You talked early about the kids camps and you had all this stuff going. So I want to talk about like establishing a program like brand, right? Not necessarily what you're known for on the court, but as you said, you have 4,000 kids in the school. You're trying to fill your numbers at each level. Even down to whatever it may be, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, right? Letting those people know, letting people in the community know, hey, this is what our program's about. These are the kind of things we do. So what are some of the things you do to establish your program brand and identity in the bigger community, not just basketball program, but maybe in the school, right? Outside the program, and then in the community in general, the Warren community in general.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I think that kind of comes back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. We want we want our program to be a class program, and that basically means our kids, our coaches, we're making good decisions, and that's part of building character. We also want to create an excitement about basketball at Warren, and that's one of the things that we've talked about is wanting the community to come watch us play and see what we're doing, and communicating that out to them so they know what we're trying to do. So I think this first summer, we started to touch on that, getting kids in the gym. Basically, I think that's the biggest thing with basketball. If you get kids in the gym, and you can start working with them, and they can start playing together, and they can start, being in our gym and meeting our coaches and meeting each other. I think that's the biggest thing. You just got to get kids in the gym. And I think that went pretty well, for us this summer, considering the transition. But I think they got to be there. They got to be there. And so I think having gym access for kids is huge, because they're not going to be able to, no matter what, you could tweet stuff out and all this until the kids are there and you can work with them. You can't sell them on what you're trying to build in a program. So I've always thought that the gym being open as much as possible is one of the things you could do to get that, and open to like our open gyms this summer are that we've been doing in July are to the high school kids. It's for outside kids. It's for kids that are in middle school. They got a sibling. Like, just getting the gym open for kids to see it, because if they enjoy it and have an experience, then they might go tell another buddy, or they might go home and tell their parents. I think it's just getting kids in the gym, getting kids with the ball in their hands, getting kids wearing T-shirts. I think that's where it all starts, to generate that excitement. And the great thing about this community is they want it. Like, they want basketball. Like, that was made very clear to me, and I think most people would agree. Like, Warren wants to have a successful basketball program, because they've had it in the past, and it's a basketball community. I mean, the football program has been able to do it. They've had some great success, but they want it in basketball too. So the selling of it is not really, I don't think it's going to be that difficult. But like I said, getting kids in the gym, getting parents to see what we're doing. And I think one of the things this summer that helped with that was that our summer league. I mean, I think I would probably guess we had the biggest summer league in the state as far as teams. I think we had, if you add up the height, we had 6 nights of varsity league, 5 courts going from about 4 to 8 or 9 o'clock. Just having our gym open, like, this is our league. This is Warren. This is what we're going to do. The gym's going to be open. We're going to be playing basketball, and I think that was a good step forward for our kids and for our community, that they can come and watch, and the parents can come and watch, and our league is at our gym, and we took a lot of pride in that.
I think I just made up Warren wants basketball as his new catchphrase right there. Warren wants basketball. All right. So as we move into our last 2 segments, the first one we call 30-second timeout. As we joke with our guests, there's no official in your timeout telling you your 30 seconds is up. So it's a very loose 30 seconds. This is your platform, your opportunity to talk about whatever you want, about yourself or your program or your family. Or I'll be honest, lately we've had some guests turn it on Todd and I and ask us questions, which is always interesting. But this is your 30 seconds to talk about whatever you want.
Okay. Yeah, I got a question for you guys. What made you start doing this? What was your reasoning for doing this podcast? I know you both put a lot of time into it. Obviously, like, we've been in conversations here the last, over the summer, and obviously it's something you guys do a great job of and take pretty seriously. So I just curious to know what was your guys' reasoning, and how's it going so far with your guests and all that kind of stuff?
To be honest, we had talked about it, right, John? We had like thrown about the idea, I think half jokingly, we should do a podcast, right?
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, and we didn't have anything to do. We were like, sitting around the house, we're like, what do we do? Well, let's try this, right? And we were lucky enough I think the timing was right to have where people were kind of shut down and people were willing to talk. And we got lucky to get some good guests right away, and just kind of built from there. And I think, it's just, John does a great job of just asking, right? Sometimes we just ask, and people are more willing than you think, somebody you might not think would answer you, be like, oh yeah, I'll come on, So that's kind of how it got going from there.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, obviously, yes, I think COVID was a big driver in it, but I think it just became something that Todd and we just looked around and we saw so many coaches that were passionate about just coaching and wanted to talk about coaching and basketball. And we've also, each of us have kind of found a little bit of our piece of it. As Todd said, I do really enjoy, making connections and booking guests. And, Todd does a ton of fast model content and putting things out there. And, we've really gained a lot of listeners because of the things he puts out there. But I think truly in the end, I think, yes, we do put some legwork into it, but honestly, it's just coaches talking about coaching, and we really enjoy that, and getting to know, people, all around the world. I mean, we've had people on from Guam to Europe to South America to everywhere. And so it's just been a really fun experience for us to just get to talk to people around the world. And I think, as Todd said, who would have thought that, coaches around the world would want to talk to Todd and I? So I think that's been a real fun piece of it for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, no, I think it's a cool thing you guys are doing. I think the more coaches can talk about coaching, it's only going to help all of us. So,
and I would add too, we've really enjoyed, especially within the state of Illinois, we've gotten a lot of, Illinois guests and Illinois coaches, and we all know, the three of us all know that the state obviously does have a passion for basketball and coaching, and the Illinois people are want to jump on with us all the time. So that's been really fun too, the local aspect as well.
All right, Coach, let's get down to the hard-hitting journalistic questions of quick hitters. Yes. We're going to throw some stuff at you. Could be basketball, could be not basketball. Most of the time it's not basketball. Just having some fun. First question, all right? You're like 4 miles from Great America, okay? Are you a roller coaster guy?
I like roller coasters. Yeah, I haven't been. I mean, I haven't been that Great American in years. We actually have a bunch of our players work there. Cool. But yeah, I love those kind of things. Like roller coasters.
So you said you haven't been, but what was back in the day, what was your favorite roller coaster? If you were going on a roller coaster, what was the one you had to go?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think the name of it. Oh man. So I grew up, I went to, high school and middle school in Minnesota, and we used to have this place like a Six Flags called Valley Fair. I don't know if it's there anymore, but damn, they had a roller coaster called, I don't forget the name of it. This thing was like, it was known for like the drop was like, almost straight down type of thing, like without even any dip or curve. I forgot the name of it, but that, man, I was all about the thing. I like roller coasters a lot. I think they're really fun.
All right, so we wanted to go into you're not teaching and coaching. You had to go a different career path. What would you have been doing?
Good question. If I wasn't teaching or coaching, well, before when I went to school, I didn't immediately go into education. I was into kind of the business stuff. So as a math guy, the numbers and economics and stuff like that always fascinated me. So I think if I wasn't doing that, I would be in business. The other thing I've always been interested in is movies. I've always been very interested in movies. One of my favorite shows is Entourage. I always just been kind of fascinated by, not necessarily saying I would be an actor, but I was always just fascinated by like that, how those things happen. So, I think it would be something along those lines. If I wasn't teaching or coaching, I'm glad I picked what I picked. I know a lot of people have, they work in an area where maybe they don't really like their job. I'm blessed because I love my job, and whether it's in the classroom or on the court, it's so I'm one of the few lucky people. I'm sure you guys would say the same, that chose the right career. And whenever I'm talking to students or players, I always try to hammer that home to them, like, make sure when you're making a decision on what you want to do with your life, it's something you really enjoy, because you do it for your life. Like, that's your job, right? So make sure you choose something that you want to do every day. And so, yeah, I think that those are probably the two things I would probably be doing if I wasn't teaching or coaching. First, I never wanted to teach or coach because I wanted to play in the NBA. And then when I when I figured out that was that, I don't know what age that hit me home. I think it was pretty early when I realized like, I think maybe coaching is probably my next venture.
There you go. All right. In-game, shirt and tie or polo?
Oh boy, combination. I would say if I had to choose, I would say polo because I'm a sweater, so I sweat a lot. I always have to have a towel with me, and shirt and tie. I like wearing a shirt and tie, but just it's long sleeve, so and it's always usually a little heavier, fabric or something. So I'm kind of a loose fit kind of guy. Because I'm a hardcore sweater, and I sweat a lot during games. So I try to wear as much dry fit stuff as I can.
All right, for you, are you more of a morning guy or more of a night owl?
That also varies too. During the season, morning. When it's during basketball season, morning, because I get up early anyway. So I'm up early, and I go to bed usually pretty early. In the summer, night, I'm just up more. So it kind of depends on the season, I guess, and what's going on at home with the family. But I'd say probably more of a morning person, as a teacher and a coach, you're always up early. I would say I'm a morning guy.
Let's be honest, during the season, the real answer is both.
Yeah, true. Right.
And you got kids too. We all know that makes you a morning person at times.
Yes,
when they
of course.
They wake up at 6 o'clock, like, what is going on here?
Of course, yeah, making pancakes right above me, probably
Exactly.
Still.
All right, are you a pen or a pencil guy to write? Like, if you're going to go write something down, are you going to write pen or pencil?
Pencil. I've always been pencil, just because that's part of the math teacher in me. Like,
yep.
I told my students, I don't care if they use pen to work just on their notes or their homework or whatever, but they can't. One of the non-negotiables is you can't use pen on a test or on an assessment. I've always been a pencil guy. I got my certain type of mechanical pencils that I love. So I would say pencil guy.
Yeah, the math teacher came out on that answer right there.
I'm a big fan of the Ticonderoga #2, nicely sharpened, looks good on the paper,
Yeah. Well, this summer I haven't been able to use those as much because I don't have a pencil sharpener at home, so I've been having to go strictly mechanical, which is nice too. And then you got some of these kids that try to do the erasable pen, which is just that's a disaster.
That's tricky, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so
pencil guy.
Before a game, what's like your pregame music choice?
My pregame music, like for the team warming up, or like
it doesn't have to be the warming up. Like you're in your office for a home game. What's playing?
I like 80s music.
Okay.
I like 80s music. So I like Journey. I like the Eagles. I like all different types. I usually just let my Spotify run. It could be new stuff. It could be older stuff. Yep. The only thing I don't get down with country. So that's pretty much the only type of music. I don't get down with country, and I don't really like the heavy metal type of stuff. Like all types of music I pretty much enjoy. Or sometimes I'll throw in a podcast. Maybe I'll start throwing you guys on before games.
We like it. Well, Coach, thank you very much for joining us. We really did. I followed you for a while at Carmel, and Todd and I are both East Suburban guys. And so we really do appreciate you being on, and we wish you nothing but the best as you start out at Warren.
Thanks. I appreciate you guys having me on, and appreciate all the stuff you guys are doing for basketball. And I know you guys are very good coaches and good guys, and so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, hosted by Todd Zazadil and Jon Plicki. For more show content and upcoming episodes, follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout, or subscribe to our podcast for upcoming episodes. For show inquiries, you can email us at afterthetimeout@gmail.com. You can find all of our previous episodes on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts by searching After the Timeout. We appreciate you listening. Tune in next time for more coaching content in-game, out of the game, and anything in between.